Welcome to ShiftWatch. I am your host, Starbuck. In this episode, a few days ago, Dave Wallace had sent me an article regarding science suggesting the possibility of crystals holding and storing DNA human genome. Some of you may recall Dave addressing this issue in late August last year. Science is slowly catching up with metaphysics. Next, an underground tremor near Japan caused a tsunami greater than expected given the seismic conditions that occurred under the ocean. The narrator goes on to say, we should be open to expecting more of this activity within the next 2 weeks based on historical patterns. Then, some of you may know Mary Rodwell, an Australian who has a wealth of knowledge and experience with multidimensional phenomenon. Here she is in an interview with the gals from Ethereal Edge podcast. And finally, here is Sharula Dux on the Agartha Network.
I revealed some information about the crystal technology of this perfectly polished, optically polished quartz, pure quartz cylinder that chromosomal and DNA information can be stored in. And this is a gift that comes from ancient Atlantis that has been received and kept by the Galactic Council of Scientists in Taurus. And this is information that they'll reveal to humanity so that we can keep permanent records of animals, humans, everything. It's like a crystal arc that's been embedded with light. And at any time, information about that reality can be retrieved from the crystal and reproduced into a living matter. Well, I guarantee it, there's going to be members that think they're in the tribe that have watched us because they watch us all the time, Lowell, and then they start spewing out the stuff that we talked about in their own version. I guarantee you guys, all of a sudden they're going to start talking about crystal technology, crystal storage mechanisms, all this stuff, but none of them are going to know what I'm talking about because they're going to hear it, and then they're going to sit there and do their talking head business and all of a sudden pretend like it's their idea. Well, guess what, folks? It's not my idea. You see, I'm in my own path. So I only channel the information they've given me that they told me that I'm allowed to share with humanity. Hey guys, I've said this from the beginning. There are things that have been revealed to me that are also a little disturbing, and some of them are deeply sad. And it's only about our own behavior and thoughts. And so they showed me these things in order to help me adjudicate my own soul and make a decision on how I choose to think 100% of the time. But we're on our path because these aren't necessarily ideas that come from some creative font. I was somebody else before I was approached by Beyond Earth Sentience. I was an entirely different human. I thought I was still a nice guy, but I was somebody else. That to be in service of others meant to be healed, to heal thyself, to remember that your thoughts follow you throughout your days, and to only think thoughts that are of goodness and helpfulness. And so when you practice that, it's like being a Buddhist or being a Tibetan monk who's practiced for years. It's no different what Lowell and I and James Gilliland or Mary Rodwell are members of this group, our tribe, our family on your channel. The people that come in and say, hey, thanks very much, Lowell and Dave. It was really nice. You guys are just as in tune as we are. And Lowell and I want to extend a big thank you to your fellowship, the way that you come onto the channel and you guys leave comments. You know, it's very deep and it's very meaningful for Lowell and I to know that we have touched you in some way emotionally or have activated you some way. And it's such a pleasure to get feedback from this community. But we're on our own path. And that's why we don't talk shit about other people and we don't talk trash about things that we don't know about. Because if we did that, our heavenly guides will remove the abilities that we have.
Yes.
The underlying message is when you stay on your own pathway and you don't borrow from other people and you think, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to add that to my belief system and then spit it out. See, it's different when you hear something that makes sense and you utilize that information because it has healed you in some way or has helped you have clarity about a complex feeling or thought. But it's an insult when I hear other people in the community say beyond earth sentience or blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? It's David Wallace. I'm the only person on the planet that started calling our friends from heaven beyond earth sentience. And why do I do
Correct.
that? Why do I say that? I say that because they're not aliens. They're not extraterrestrial, right? They're beyond earth sentience. They're sentient species from far beyond our world who love us and care about us. They don't fly around in UFOs and UAPs. They fly around in beautiful, beautiful constructions that are known as interstellar conveyance. And I may not be the first person to coin that term, but believe me, if anyone wants to talk about crystal technology, about storing human DNA in a crystal,
September 24th, 2024 at 8:14 a.m. local time, a moderate magnitude 5.9 earthquake struck offshore of a completely uninhabited volcanic pinnacle in Japan's Izu Islands. Despite being centered at a fairly shallow depth of 9 kilometers or 5.6 miles below the top of the local seafloor, this quake was not felt by anyone due to its remote location and only modest size. And yet, all of a sudden, several nearby ocean buoys detected an irregular wave that lasted for 3 minutes and caused them to rise by a little less than a meter. Suddenly, numerous alerts were sent out warning that a tsunami had been generated to people not only on Japan's Izu Islands, but also a section of Japan's east coast, with the alert telling people to move to higher ground. As the tsunami raced towards several populated settlements at an average speed of 343 km per hour or 213 miles per hour, the waves slowly decreased in height. Yet, at 8:45 a.m. local time, a 50-centimeter high wave struck the island of Hachichojima, home to a population of 7,200. It then went on to strike dozens of other towns, reaching numerous coastlines within a 1,609-kilometer or 1,000-mile radius of the tsunami's origin. And, of this, only areas within a 400-kilometer radius saw a measurable tsunami strike. Luckily, due to the small maximum run-up height of the tsunami, aka only 19.7 inches, no damage of any kind was reported. Yet, here is the problem. Due to this earthquake's only modest magnitude, a tsunami should have not occurred as it was 63.1 times too small in terms of overall energy to have been expected to generate a tsunami in the traditional sense. Generally speaking, only earthquakes of magnitude 7.1 or larger generate tsunamis, while generally earthquakes with a magnitude of 7.5 or higher have the potential to generate large and destructive tsunamis. The reason for this is that the tsunami which was generated did not have a typical earthquake origin. Instead, just like the two tsunamis which were generated 180 kilometers to the south during October of 2023, they were both volcanic and tectonic in origin. If we look 12.3 kilometers to the south of the magnitude 5.9 quake's epicenter, there is a small 7.4-acre island pinnacle which rises 136 meters or 446 feet above the ocean's surface. This peak represents the emergent summit of the Sumisujima volcano, which last erupted in 1916. However, if we zoom out, you will see clear-cut evidence of a massive underwater caldera. In this caldera, which formed sometime in the last 20,000 years and may have even produced a 71.8 kilometer long pyroclastic flow, is likely the source of our tsunami, specifically through a mechanism referred to as trapdoor faulting. These trapdoor faults, much like their name implies, move like a trapdoor, except one side sinks and one side rises. For these events to occur, 3 things are needed: a volcano with an active magma chamber, a large caldera presumably more than 5 kilometers wide which is undergoing some form of resurgence, and a body of overlying water. At the present, molten rock is still likely slowly building in Sumisujima's underlying magma chamber, which largely forms a sill directly underneath the caldera. Thus, as magma builds unevenly, expanding more on the western section of the caldera, it places an increasing amount of strain on the overlying caldera ring faults. This pressure continues to build until suddenly the fault slips, which in the case of the October 8, 2023 event was by around 4 meters or 13.1 feet in mere seconds, generating a moderate magnitude reverse fault earthquake. However, like a trapdoor, the stresses of the magma caused the side within the caldera closest to the earthquake to rapidly rise, while the opposite side of the caldera quickly falls by about the same amount. This subsequently generates uplift, and since this displaces overlying water, a tsunami is generated of a size more typical of earthquakes, at least a full 1 magnitude larger. Yesterday's event was not a unique occurrence, as the Sumi-Sujima caldera has produced 5 other small tsunamis via the exact same mechanism between 1984 and 2018. More such events are likely to occur in the future, and I want to add that there is an increased risk of more small tsunamis being generated during the next 2 weeks in the same location due to the risk of similar or larger magnitude aftershocks.
It's an absolute pleasure, Tara, and Tracy too. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming.
Mary, I know your career began as a nurse and a midwife and a counselor before you transitioned into the more holistic side of therapy as a metaphysical teacher. Can you tell us more about how you made that shift into these types of healing modalities?
Well, to Tracy it is probably the best thing to say that, first of all, I've always been interested in the weird and the wonderful. So if it was anything to do with that was different to the average reality, somehow that intrigued me, even as a teenager. Supernatural, paranormal, all those kind of things intrigued me, because most of the time none of that those were subjects that you didn't hear about. It was only your 5 senses that was given any kind of credibility, and anything beyond that was always considered too strange. And yet all these stories of people experiencing unusual things fascinated me. And of course, the spiritual part of me wanted to understand more of why we're here, what's it all about, what's the big picture. So I've always been a bit of a seeker, right from a youngster, really. So that's the backdrop. The backdrop then went into nursing and midwifery, where it's all very physical, very practical, down to earth kind of healing. I didn't realize there was another level to that till I went into counseling, where I realized that a lot of illness and a lot of distress is often caused by emotional or psychological experiences. And that often led to disease. So I got very caught up in the work with counseling and what have you. When I moved to Australia, I made a conscious choice to continue with counseling rather than go back into nursing. And I was working with grief and bereavement, hospice. And that, of course, opened up so many things, because what you get there is people questioning what's life after death, because many of them were given a short time to live or whatever. Or I was dealing with profound grief, where again, it's, losing somebody that was closest to them and having to deal with that emotional trauma, but also with weird things happening to people. Like, I felt my mum was telling me this, or I got this message to look under the bed because there was something there that was waiting for me that my mum didn't tell me about. Really unusual kind of weird stuff, I call it, So very, very intrigued about the whole spiritual realm. This led me into exploring my own awareness. And I was in a group for 3 years where I learned how to open up and to honor the multidimensional experiences that I was having, and the whole team, the whole group were having over 3 years. We did everything, remote healing, you name it, we sort of had a go at it, really. And what it did prove to me was this wasn't just a gift that some people have. What I discovered, without doubt, because I consider myself very down to earth, very normal kind of individual, what I discovered was I was having things happen that I couldn't explain in normal conventional terms. And I remember thinking, if I'm going around the bend, I'm going in good company, because 2 of them were clinical psychologists that were part of that group. So I thought, we're all losing the plot here, or it's real. But what it proved to me more than anything is everybody has these abilities. It's just that they've been, if you like, in many ways not understood, or suppressed due to beliefs, whether it's religious beliefs, educational beliefs, scientific beliefs. And many of those that were having these experiences were really questioning their reality because of that. One step further from that, by me reading so eclectically, as I say, if it was weird and wonderful, I usually had a book on it. 2 books came up into my awareness. One of them was Dr. John Mack, who was a professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, who wrote Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, where he'd done all the psychological testing, and he was absolutely convinced this was real. And the other one was by Whitley Strieber, an experiencer. Everybody knows the classic book Communion with the E.T. face on it, and his personal experience. And it was when I just recently read those, somebody walked through the door and said to me, I've heard you're open-minded. For this, they just think you're crazy. For this, the relatives won't come to the house because they think it's demons, waking up with marks on his body, shaved areas. And it wasn't just him having the experience, which clinched it for me, because it was his partner and the children too, because this was a family affair. And that's what many people who have experiences are aware of. There's an intergenerational link that it's the whole family. It's not just one individual, even if not all the family realize it's going on. And that in itself tells you unless it's a mass hallucination, there's something real that's happening. Within 2 weeks, another one walked through the door, and I'm suddenly thinking, this isn't rare anymore, is it? 2 weeks later, somebody else. I started in a support group, 12 people turned up. This is in Perth, which had just over 2 million at the time or whatever. How's this? And that exploded then, because I realized lots of people were having experiences, but not often understanding what they were, and just thinking maybe they're just weird, something wrong with them, and not necessarily understanding that this is a reality and that they're having encounters with not just physical intelligences. We're talking about interdimensional ones like light beings and what have you, extra dimensional ones, transdimensional ones, and even some that may come from our future. So we're not talking about something that's very black and white here. We're talking about something that covers the whole dimensional field. And many of them may have these experiences after they've had a near-death experience or a shamanic experience, or starting healing and then finding themselves opening up, working with energies, and suddenly feeling presences around them. So this covers the gamut of what we call multidimensional experiences, astral traveling, remote viewing. All of these can end up with an interaction with these intelligences, whether they're physical or non-physical.
Within the Agartha Network, the cities that are allowed to join are only those that are based on light principles, only those that are based on love, only those that does not hurt, only those that are based on non-aggression fate. Within the Agarthian Network, besides Telos, which is the capital, there are 4 more cities, for instance, that are based on Lemurian technology and Lemurian ideas. One is called Rama, which is underneath India. Rama being the original name of India. The Rama culture is consisted of people that are almost pure Lemurian before the so-called Aryan race entered India. The other 2 cities that hold an allegiance to Telos but are very independent are Uyghur cities. One is called Shonshi, which is under Tibet, not too far from the capital of Tibet. It is being sheltered from the surface by a Tibetan lamasery. This is a Uyghur city. Uyghurs are a group of people that left Lemuria 40 to 50,000 years ago and situated themselves throughout much of what is Asia, India, and Central Europe. The second Uyghur city is called Xinhua. Xinhua is in the Gobi, or should I say under the Gobi Desert. This too is a Uyghur city. On top of the Atlantean city, which is called Posidid, the one underneath the Monte Grasso Plateau, there is also another Atlantean city just a little farther north, and there is another Atlantean city that is underneath the Atlantic Ocean, and several other smaller satellite cities throughout the planet. As I said, these are all a member of the Agartha Confederation. Plus there are several independent cities that are not a branch of any of the larger cities that have simply built subterranean to escape things that have happened on the surface. Some pre-Atlantean Lemurian disaster, some post.